Many of us did not learn in Sunday school that God had a wife. Who is this wife? How come we did not learn about her? Her name is Ashera. In this video, I will go over a brief history or herstory of Ashera, the goddess. She was worshipped alongside Yahweh during the Deuteronomic period that we start to see the demonization of Ashera. Ashera is associated with roots, trees, healing herbs associated with trees, wisdom, sacred knowledge, sacred sexuality, lilies and lions, and even knowledge of nature. She is also known as the Queen of Heaven. One of her other names is Inanna, and that is Venus. And with Venus, of course, of beauty, war, love. She is a great battle goddess. She can go before you and clear the pathway. It sounds very familiar and very similar to El or Elohim or Yahweh, the God of battle, among other things. And if you look in the Bible, there's so many different names for the overall God. If we really were to expand it out, these are pretty much attributes of different smaller gods that were absorbed into one God. Another name is a star. And you can find her listed in the biblical text in the book of Jeremiah, in the book of Proverbs, and throughout the Old Testament. And I'm not exactly sure about with the New Testament. The only reason why I'm not exactly sure because I like to go through and I like to do a lot of research before I mention anything. She could be mentioned in the New Testament, but under a different name though. So I'm not exactly for sure about that. If you read some of the texts where they would go into the temples and they would take her symbols and burn them and condemn them, that's what they do throughout colonization, where a group of people, colonizers, will come into a territory and to assert dominance. They would start with the religious figures and the rulers, and they will gain influence there, and then it will spread out. And especially if you take someone's spiritual beliefs and their practices, you can definitely gain dominance over them. Think about it, if there is equality amongst the sexes or amongst the genders, how can one assert their dominance? If the women feel like they're equal to the men and the men have a certain agenda or they want things done a certain way, they can't go back and forth. So the best way how to alleviate that problem is to make a sovereign God that is male dominant and make the woman subservient. We have other situations like Lilith, which I did write an article on years ago, and I will do a video about her eventually. But you can see with that, and even Eve, and throughout the entire biblical text, which a lot of that is symbolic, which I love getting into that. And of course, you can go check out my YouTube channel where I get into more details about the symbology and how to decode the text. But that's the best way of how to assert the dominance is through religion. Just a quick note, the reason why the male goes first is because the masculine is the outward expression and the divine feminine is the inward expression. So you have action that goes before, you have action that clears the way, but is led and guided by the intuitive self, which is the divine feminine. And you can see this within the Hebrew alphabet where you have the Aleph, which is the symbol of A, and then you have Bet, which is B. That is like a temple or either a house, and where you will have the mother and the child inside of the house or the tent, and the male, the father, will stand outside of the tent to protect what is inside of the tent. So the masculine, the ego, protects what's inside of the tent, which is the inner self, the intuitive self, the emotions. She's connected to trees and poles, but one pole that I specifically think about is in the Old Testament where you had the bronze serpent on the pole, and the people were told to look at that pole, look at the serpent and the pole for healing. So that is connected to Christ, but it also could be connected to Ashera because a lot of the worship of Ashera happened during that time period and even before and after. It started to die out a little bit after. But she is, like how I said, is known for healing and healing serpent bites. And in that story, if you go look back in that old story in the Old Testament where the people were complaining, then they were bitten by serpents, and then they, needed healing, and they went to Moses, and then he said he gave them that remedy for to look at the pole with the serpent on it. And in the text, women would burn incense to her. And I just so happen to love incense, one of my favorite ways of how to worship and connect to the spiritual realms, besides burning candles, of course. So, so ways that how you can connect to her, sitting under a tree. You know, I love going outside and sitting under a tree, of course, burning incense, and, connecting to staffs and poles and rods. A masculine expression of that is Musa, also known as Moses. And then you have the feminine expression that is Ashera, okay? And, among others, as we continue to dive deeper into these biblical studies, which I just love. So if you enjoy it, so make sure that you do join whatever platform that you may be watching this on or listening to this on. Make sure you do follow, because we're going to be getting more into this type of energy. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. This is Minister Ashley. Peace.